Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
As we draw closer to the predicted singularity, it seems another use for artificial intelligence emerges daily. Meanwhile, many predict our continued existence may depend on the unseen forces at play at the quantum level. Can AI assist with quantum level access and management? Mission Evolution Radio Show is coming to you around the world on the Exxon Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Joining us this hour to explore the singularity, artificial intelligence, and the new renaissance is Douglas Grunther. Douglas graduated from Columbia University, where he was a Rhodes Scholarship finalist. He's been the featured speaker in front of national audiences and is a dreamwork facilitator, certified by Dr. Jeremy Taylor, co-founder of the International Association for the Study of Dreams. His website, douglasgrunther.com. Douglas, thanks so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Great to be with you, Gwilda.
So it's been some interesting times that we're dealing with right now. And, it's hard to look around at the world events and not recognize we're in a time of great change. What do you think is causing all these shifts, Douglas?
Well, I'm very much aware of the title of your podcast, Mission Evolution, which is right in line with the zeitgeist, because I am convinced, as are a number of others, that we, meaning humanity, is at the precipice of an evolutionary leap. This has happened before humans showed up and in human evolution. And I think that most of the anxiety that we're all feeling, while we want to say it's all the 24/7 news cycle, underneath that, I believe that the two main forces that are causing this anxiety, but are also unleashing creativity at a level that could cause and help this evolutionary leap, are AI, which for all of its issues and scariness is a potent form of intelligence that we unleashed. AI came out of the human brain, and we can talk during this conversation about ways of integrating with that. And then we also have what we politely call climate change, which is nothing less than the deterioration of the very biosphere that we need for life here on the planet. And we're already experiencing massive flooding around the world, massive droughts, increase in hurricanes and tornadoes. And this is only going to increase. And these are all, in my opinion, elements of nature's intelligence calling on us to make a very important evolutionary leap if we are to continue thriving here on planet Earth.
Well, I understand that the evolution that you were speaking about that's happened before, evolutionary leaps, are precipitated by some major change that moves us forward. Some say it might be our relative positioning in the galaxy and the frequencies that impact the Earth. What do you think is setting this one up for us?
As I continue to think about and contemplate where we are, keep coming back to nature's intelligence. Because for well over 500 years, beginning with modern Western civilization, but now all around the world, we've been under the spell, I would say, of what's called the materialist paradigm. Now, a paradigm is the way that we consciously and even more importantly, unconsciously see the world. And the materialist paradigm sees the world as a series of objects to be manipulated and grasped for. And this is the strength of the left hemisphere of our brain. This has been shown through neurological laboratory experiments around the world. And this grasping and seeing the world as individual objects to be grabbed for and possessed has led to enormously gifted technologies that have expanded human lifespan, that give us amazing medical technologies like MRI and EKGs, that give us a lot of the comforts of modern life. But while we were busy increasing wealth around the world and increasing technology around the world, we were blind to what the right hemisphere of our brain is capable of, the big picture, to see how we were toxifying the entire planet. That nature is not something that can be grasped for our personal use without causing huge disruption.
So what has us kind of stuck in the, you said it was the left hemisphere of the brain or the right hemisphere? We're kind of stuck in the left and we're deteriorating the right. What caused that?
Well, it started with some very positive things. You see, there's the law of unintended consequences. The modern world really kind of got initiated during the Italian Renaissance when Galileo first peered through his improved telescope. He didn't invent the telescope, but he improved it to the point where he could see, by gazing out into the stars and planets, that planet Earth was not the center of the universe. How'd that do for the ego of humans, who were convinced we were, and that we were one of a number of planets circling around a larger sun. That started modern science, and we learned that if we learn how things work, we can use them for our own advantage. And then we had the brilliant scientist Isaac Newton and the philosopher Rene Descartes, who both basically said, if we want to understand how the world works, we need to see it as independent objects that have cause and effect. And we as humans, because we have these brilliant minds, according to Descartes, we can separate our minds from our bodily functions and just sort of abstractly take what we need from nature. And of course, what the perennial philosophy has been teaching us for thousands of years is that nature is a holistic system. It's a living system that we are part of. And kicking and screaming, we are going to either learn or be really unhappy with the results if we continue to see nature as something we do take from in order to give us more comfort and security, as opposed to being a part of this magnificent intelligence called nature, which works best, and we can get into the scientific reasons that prove this. Evolution and nature work best with collaboration, not competition. That has been proven scientifically. But we are still living, it's starting to deteriorate, but we're still living with this left hemisphere materialist view that nature is a competition, and that we want to be a winner, not a loser, and that for every winner there has to be a loser, called the zero-sum game.
So if, Douglas, why don't we clarify a little bit for our listeners, what are the different functions of the left versus the right hemisphere of the brain?
This is so important. It started to become more aware in the 1960s, and then was really catapulted forward with a brilliant book by Dr. Ian McGilchrist called The Master and His Emissary, which was published about 10 years ago. And Ian, who I had a good chance to interview, was a literary professor who then went into medicine, psychiatry, neurology, and philosophy. And in his book, he has over 1,800 references to laboratory experiments which prove the basic thesis that the key difference between the left and right hemisphere of our brains is that the left hemisphere is wired to understand things by breaking them down into simpler parts, the same way a watchmaker would take apart a watch and put the pieces back together to discover what the missing pieces were. And that's how we created a lot of great technology, highways, bridges, computers. But the right hemisphere of our brain, which is physically larger and is more intricately wired than the left, so the question is, why would nature do that if it wasn't more important? The right hemisphere of our brain understands the world holistically. It can understand, it intuits something as a whole system, which can't be understood by breaking it down. It has to be understood by intuiting its wholeness, the characters that make it whole, and give us a bigger picture of what's going on. I can give us, yeah.
It sounds like the two really need to talk to each other more for us to see reality in a more accurate way.
Well, now you put your finger on a key thing. Why don't they? Okay. The two hemispheres are divided by a series of nerve endings called the corpus callosum. And while the right hemisphere, because it is more empathic, when you can see something in the bigger picture in a holistic way, it encourages empathy and feelings for others, not just for oneself or one's family. Okay? And the right hemisphere is happy to share what it gets from the unconscious. And we now know from laboratory experiments, it's been empirically proved, that our dreams, our intuitions, our imaginative flights of ecstasy come from the unconscious into the right hemisphere, which doesn't try to analyze it, it takes it all in. Then it will hand it over to the left hemisphere. But here's the key answer to your question. The left hemisphere of our brain is not wired to share. It's wired to be territorial and to hold on. Why? Because if we were a lion in the jungle, in order to survive, we have to be extremely protective of our territory. And so part of the mammalian brain is territorial, and that's the left hemisphere. But we were gifted by nature with an even larger and more intricately wired right hemisphere, which sees that we do better when we collaborate with people rather than compete with them. So the left hemisphere is just not wired to really converse with the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere is. So it's our job as the directors of our brains to make sure that that we give precedence to the right hemisphere when it comes to things like sharing, empathy, how to get along with others, how to create economic and social systems that benefit more people.
Well, we're going to have to pick up on how to achieve that on the other side of the station break. Douglas and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
One people, one nation, searching for the light. One people, one nation, coming from the stars. One people, one nation, to heal this earth of ours. The end has come, the night has fallen. I have reached the end of days. What's real is not, reason fails me. I've gone beyond all known.
Is my brain changing? With us this hour discussing the rapid shifts we're experiencing is Douglas Grunther. Douglas is the author of The Quantum and the Dream, Visionary Consciousness, AI, and the New Renaissance. Douglas, we were talking about how the left brain and the right brain aren't communicating as well as we might like in order to get the full picture. And you said the left brain is the selfish one and the right brain is the sharing, or was it the other way around?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so if the left brain is happy to share, but then the right brain hoards it, it kind of dead stops there, doesn't it?
Well, it's actually the reverse. The right hemisphere never hoards. It's very empathic. It's a big picture seeker.
Okay.
It's a part of our brain. Everybody who's listening to this has experienced the right hemisphere of the brain. Anytime you're thrilled or upset by a dream, anytime you have an intuitive sense of something, anytime you have a flight of reverie or fancy, anytime you go into what's called an alpha brainwave state, when time just seems to flow, right? Instead of something being an arduous task, we sort of flow with it. All those experiences can be shown to occur in the right hemisphere of our brain. And it doesn't take a lot of effort and training, just really kind of intention to shift from the left to the right, because if we're aware of our actions, we know when we're being a little too self-centered and a little too materialistic, and when we are being more open, imaginative, and spiritual. And so nature gave us both of these sides of our brain, and it's our job to have them communicate. But here's, to me, the big thing that I've discovered and why I am optimistic about AI, despite its enormous issues. If we look at how computers think, it's very close to the way our left hemisphere thinks. Computers are already better than us at accessing information, analyzing that information by breaking it down into smaller parts, and then putting the parts together into a more cohesive whole. I don't think anybody can argue that as we sit here right now, computers are better at that function than we are. Before AI showed up, that was our big gold star. We were the species that could gather information, the age of information, analyze it, and use that information in ways no other animal could. We're not needed for that as much anymore because computers are already better. My point is that if computers are already better than us at most of what the left hemisphere does, that gives us the freedom to shift to the right hemisphere, which the computers can't do, because the right hemisphere is embodied in the human brain. We can't separate our minds from our bodies. Descartes thought we could. He was wrong. And so computers, as brilliant as they are, and they can certainly imitate human feelings, they can't feel because their intelligence is mechanistic. Our intelligence at its deepest level is embodied and what's called sentient. We can feel.
Okay,
And
so if the right hemisphere of the brain is more in contact with our feeling, is it more in contact with our heart, which of course resides in the physical body?
Yes, and there is some. Now, I'm not a scientist, but I love researching in science. My background's philosophy, depth psychology, and media. But there is evidence that the brain is connected to the heart in more sensitive ways than we originally thought. But there's also no question that who we are, and this, again, this is not a debatable point, even though it's ignored. Virtually every psychologist, neurologist would agree that some 95 to 99% of what we think, feel, see in the world, and act upon comes from the unconscious mind. And yet, go to a bookstore and look at the books on consciousness, which is a very popular subject right now. And I challenge you to go into the index and find references to the unconscious. The right hemisphere of the brain is directly tied to our unconscious. And the more we learn to play in the right hemisphere, and I call the right hemisphere, Gwilda, the ultimate playground of vision and imagination, that's where we're going to be succeeding, not only philosophically and spiritually, but practically, because computers, as I mentioned, are terrific companions when it comes to accessing and analyzing information. But computers are forcing us to look at, I feel this is a call from nature's intelligence, from evolution, why we need the leap. The appearance of AI is, to me, a mirror that is challenging us to look more deeply into what it means to be human.
Otherwise, we've replaced ourselves, haven't we?
Absolutely. That's why people fear that computers are going to take over everything, because if we continue in the materialist paradigm, they will. I don't think so. We're already seeing evidence of this shift to the right hemisphere. And one of those is a quote that a lot of people might be familiar with from the great Albert Einstein. Now, Einstein was named by Time magazine as the person of the 20th century. That doesn't look bad on your resume, okay? and as a scientist. But here's a direct quote from Albert Einstein. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we now know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. Okay, that's coming from a scientist. And it's been shown that the reason he discovered relativity, E equals mc squared, before anybody else is because he loved to play in the right hemisphere of his brain. He did thought experiments, chasing light beams.
But our entire educational system is designed on working in the left hemisphere of the brain, is it not? And remembering things that have already been discovered.
This is why I'm so in love with the World Wide Web, for all of its noise and all of its problems. I could not agree with you more. One of the most, I'm getting chills now, one of the most vibrational experiences I ever had will speak to this. I was finishing up my freshman year at Columbia, and I lived about an hour away. And I was driving home, and I happened to drive by my old grade school. And something made me stop. And I looked at that building. It's a building very much like thousands of other schools, the brick rectangular building, right? And I realized that it looked like a factory. Then I did a little research. There's a reason that most of our schools look like factories, because that's what they were intended to be. Our educational system is still based, up until college at least, on a 19th century industrial model based on factory and teaching people that you're either going to be a factory worker or a factory owner. So it's not a coincidence that just looking at the architecture as well as the subject matter of what kids are supposedly educated. The word education has an interesting etymology. It comes from the Latin to draw out. We gave our species the name Homo sapiens, which means the wise one. So a proper education would draw out wisdom. We don't see that very often until maybe you're lucky to get a really good college professor, once in a while a really good grade school or high school teacher. The reason I'm bullish on the World Wide Web is because there's nothing preventing students or us, and we should be students our whole life, from accessing the most interesting and fascinating knowledge and wisdom, all available to us keystrokes away on the World Wide Web.
But Douglas, as you kind of mentioned, there's also every bit as much, if not more, garbage and falsehood out there as there is information. How do you weed through that in order to draw on what you need?
There's a wonderful paradigm called signal to noise ratio. Okay, it's a mathematical formula for the reason that you and I can talk over the World Wide Web and we can hear each other clearly and your listeners can hear us clearly. Okay, I think signal to noise ratio is a really good contemplation or meditation for us, because before the internet there was a lot of noise. What was the criticism of TV? Too many commercials, advertising. I was addicted to sugar by the time I was 6 years old, watching kids' TV and all the advertisements for sugar, right? And I wanted every new toy that was being advertised. Every new medium creates certain noise as well as certain signals. It's our job to find the signal by getting underneath the noise. And here's an analogy I think might make some sense. I know through, looking at the people you talk to, you're pretty familiar with meditation techniques. And I imagine that a lot of your listeners are. And whether it's a formal meditation, I do an informal contemplation. What is the first thing that we all experience when we first start to slow down our brain waves and either contemplate or meditate? We encounter the chattering monkey mind, right? The noise inside of our own head, what we haven't accomplished today, what we should be aware of. Oh my God, how come we didn't get that done today? All that noise is something we're all familiar with. Why should we expect when we go on a screen that connects 5.5 billion brains, that it should be anything other than noisy on the surface. Our own minds are noisy on the surface. Just as we can learn to meditate, contemplate, get into an alpha state, use our imagination, and contemplative skills, it's our job to get underneath the noise of all the advertisers, all the people trying to get our attention. That's our job. And I can't think of a more important thing for us to contemplate than what we're paying attention to.
Well, it's that time for us to contemplate another station break. Douglas and I will be right back to continue our discussion, so stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
One people, one nation, coming from the stars. One people, one nation, to heal this earth of ours. Our gracious Mother Earth, our Father in the sky. I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind. I am scattered upon the wind. I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind. I am scattered upon the wind. I've been broken, shattered, cast to the wind. I am scattered.
If we're entering an age of unity, why can't we integrate our brains? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing evolution and the impact of AI is Douglas Grunther. His website, douglasgrunther.com. So Douglas, that is the question. Instead of shifting hemispheres, can we move to the point that we can be integrating them?
Yes, and I think that if we look at ourselves honestly, and I was very taken by the song or chant that you were playing during the break.
Oh, thank you.
About being broken.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One of the ironies that I've come to realize, kicking and screaming, of course, is that we normally, individually and collectively, don't make a necessary leap until things fall apart. One of my favorite.
We're seeing plenty of falling apart right now, aren't we?
Well, yes, and if we look at evolution, the Italian, I'm calling for a new renaissance. You say, how can there be a new renaissance with all this political craziness and economic disparity and wars still going on, and we're still not feeding people we can, and all the climate change turbulence, and AI, what is it doing to us? All of this, to me, is nature creating huge dissolutions, huge breakdowns, because that's the way, kicking and screaming, unless we're a little more aware of what we're paying attention to, the leap we need to make.
Douglas,
Terry,
is that because the foundation of this very existence that we're living, that's falling apart around us, is based on only one half of the equation, based on the left brain versus the right?
I think that's a very powerful way to look at it, because it brings it down to the individual level. About a year ago, this light bulb went off in my head, and I now think it's the most important phrase for what we're talking about, to bring it really down to something concrete and specific. And that question is, what are we paying attention to? For all of the brilliant books that have been written on consciousness, it comes down to, what are we paying attention to? And that's such an interesting phrase to me, Gwilda, because clearly modern societies are based a lot on economic gain. Okay, we all need a certain amount of economic security in order to enjoy our lives, and so we put a lot of emphasis on what something's worth monetarily, right? So isn't it interesting that we use the phrase to pay attention, to me, that's a calling from the unconscious and the right hemisphere of the brain saying, what we pay attention to has as much, if not more, to do with the quality of our life than what we are paying for with money or getting from money. What we pay attention to determines in large effect how we feel about ourselves and how we act with others. And in the age of the World Wide Web, when, as you point out, there's so many distractions, so much noise, so many advertisers and political elements trying to get our attention, it's our job, our task, to be aware of what we're paying attention to and choose, do I really want to pay attention to that or not?
Well, Douglas, this is all well and good, and I totally agree with you. However, our children are being brought up on the access to the World Wide Web, and are they mature enough to make that discernment?
This is going to depend upon parenting and education. In some ways, this is not that different from when I was growing up as a baby boomer. I was put in front of a TV when I was 5 years old. My parents figured out, and they were good people, this is the greatest babysitter of all time. I was mesmerized. I didn't have to worry about what I was doing, where I was going. I sat in front of that TV, and I got quickly addicted to sugar and wanting to have the next toy, because this is what was advertised to me. As an adult, it was my responsibility. I'm off sugar, and I've downsized, my life because I enjoy it more. Yes, it's a big challenge, but it's always been a challenge. And the yin and the yang of it, and yin yang's been around for thousands of years, right? You can't separate the light and the dark. You can't separate the good from the bad. It's all mixed in. And when we turn on our digital screen, and if it wasn't for the digital screen and AI and the World Wide Web, you and I wouldn't be talking to each other right now, right? And we're choosing to talk about more spiritually oriented insights and understanding how our brains work by understanding the wiring of the left and right hemisphere of our brain and how we can enjoy life so much more by taking imaginative leaps and intuitive leaps into new ways of seeing things in the right hemisphere of our brain. The World Wide Web makes that easier than ever. At the same time, it makes it easier than ever for people with bad intentions or greedy intentions to grab our attention. This is a calling. And yes, it's very challenging for kids. And that's why I believe you're going to see some real changes in the way our educational system works, because we can't ignore the digital screen. Australia is trying an experiment. My bet is it will fail. They're saying, if you're under a certain age, you're not allowed up there for certain amounts of time. How did prohibition work? It increased alcohol problems. No, it's our job as citizens, as parents, as educators, as global citizens, to really do what we're doing now, Gwilda, which is talk about these issues and how we can adjust and learn that what we pay attention to is such a powerful determinant of how we feel about ourselves and the world.
So let's get back to the, and I hear you, I do hear you. Let's get back to the integration of the left and the right hemisphere of the brain. You indicated that you think that's the direction we're going. How soon do you think we're going to get there, and what impact is that going to have on consciousness?
Well, I specifically am not a futurist. I think about the future. I'm concerned about it. I believe we're at the precipice of an evolutionary leap that is going to get us to a new renaissance. But what it takes is my favorite quote from Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, who said, "Never think that a small group of concerned citizens can't change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has." So I feel that the appearance of the World Wide Web, for all of its problems, is making it easier than ever for a small group of concerted citizens to learn about each other, communicate with each other, and create this feedback system. In science, it's called self-organization, which you and I are helping in our small way right now to induce. And I also go to another great quote that to me says what we're talking about. In the late 1960s, when the Beatles were the most powerful force on the planet, John Lennon was put under great pressure to come up with a song that could express to all of his millions of young followers, like me, how to deal with the revolutionary shifts going on in the in the 60s revolution, the Cultural Revolution. And he came up with this brilliant lyric in the song Revolution, which says, "You say it's the institution. I say you better free your mind instead." Okay, so I would put John Lennon on the same level as a Nelson Mandela, because he was saying, with all the turbulence, it's not just about protesting. It's not just about joining organizations. We are here on the planet to try to figure out how we can use our minds most effectively. And our minds are connected with our hearts. And that's what's created leaps in evolution before. You know, the Italian Renaissance was induced in great part by the horrific Black Plague, which was on its way to killing a third of Europe. And they didn't know what the cause was. And that inspired them to extract as much wisdom as they could from the past and then integrate it and create new ways of thinking and seeing the world. And I believe we're in a similar situation now. I believe that climate change and the spread of AI is just as powerful and frightening a force as the Black Plague was. And I am confident that we humans, as we've done before, we made it through ice ages with technologies no more sophisticated than sticks and stones. You know, I still have confidence that kicking and screaming, perhaps, and with a lot more turbulence than we'd like, enough of us are going to free up our minds, shift to the right hemisphere, and realize that the jobs of the future are going to be more about imagination and creativity than a resume. And that's already happening.
Well, I don't know if we'll have time to finish this question in this segment, but I'd like to initiate it. We've been talking theory and all this is wonderful, but where does the rubber hit the pavement? How do we physically shift from one side of the brain to the other, and how can we move towards integration?
Many ways. On an individual level, my choice is dreamwork. Pay more attention to your dreams. My dream teacher, Jeremy Taylor, wrote a wonderful book. There are many great books on how to learn to not only understand your dreams intellectually, but feel what they're trying to tell us. I think that that if we look at our educational system, right now, a student can use a chat bot and create an essay in less than 30 seconds that sounds pretty good, and then maybe spend a little time just rewriting it a little bit. So it's up to teachers to give assignments that are more imaginative. So for an example, here would be a specific example. If a teacher...
Well, I'm sorry, Douglas. We have run into that time when we need to take another station break and pick this up on the other side. Please stay with us as Douglas and I continue to explore our rapidly changing reality. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
Searching for the light. One people, one nation, coming from the stars. One people, one nation, to heal this earth of ours. Our gracious Mother Earth. Brilliant feathers of an unearthly hue glide by on the edge of his dream. A whisper of touch, an unheard song, whose bird takes flight. haunted by his broken heart.
Are we dreaming reality, or is reality dreaming us? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Douglas Grunther. His website, douglasgrunther.com. Douglas, you mentioned we were talking about methods, actual methods that we can use to start this shift from the left to the right to integrated brain. And you brought up dreams, remembering your dreams, working with your dreams. So how can we actually use those dreams to integrate our brain?
So the one thing one can do, this is real simple. Get a notebook and title it my dream book, my dream journal, whatever you choose. And when you fall asleep at night, no music, no TV, as you're falling asleep, make the intention that if you remember a dream, you'll write it down. Now, we dream 4 to 6 times a night. Nature requires that for reasons we don't have time to get into today, but it's very therapeutic. And the more we pay attention to our dreams, the more we'll remember a dream. If a dream wakes us up in the middle of the night and it's a long dream, we can just write down the main elements of the dream, and the next day you will recall most of the dream. Okay? Now, when you get a dream and you're writing it down, write down what you're feeling, what did it make you feel? Where in the dream did you get upset, or what in the dream excited you? Dreams work on the emotional as well as the intellectual level. Dreams not only need to be analyzed, there are companions. There are wise inner teachers. And if we had time, I could show, and I've certainly written about, history has been changed for the better by horrific nightmares. When the person who had the nightmare realized, whoa, there was important information in there. And so it's not about so much analyzing your dreams, although that's okay as a start. It's about becoming familiar with the way they express themselves. And then you can ask questions to your dream self. If you write it down, wait a day, you can go back into the dream, replay it in your mind, right, like a VCR, and ask a question to one of the characters in your dream. So what I'm saying is we need to be more playful in order to be more intelligent. And that's why I love Einstein's quote about imagination more important than knowledge. We're already seeing, since you asked the important question, how does this practically work? Gwilda, we're already seeing Deloitte Touche, the largest service organization in the world, business service organization, is now advocating that if you want to hire the right person, don't hire the person with the best resume on paper. Ask them something that forces a creative answer. Hire the person who's more imaginative, more intuitive, who has a bigger picture of what's going on, who can ask questions that maybe no one in your organization asked before. We're seeing this on the practical level, giving people a better opportunity to find really good work. And so yeah.
So I would ask the question, are we dreaming reality, or is reality dreaming us?
Yes.
So the Aboriginals believed that they dreamed reality, and they worked with their dreams in waking and in sleeping, and still do. So where does that fit in here? Where does that concept fit in here? It's more than just having dream and getting messages, isn't it?
The most successful scientific theory in the history of humankind is quantum physics. And the key players, the key developers of quantum physics, 4 of them, were deeply immersed in ancient Eastern spiritual wisdom. One of them, who was nominated for a Nobel Prize by Albert Einstein, Wolfgang Pauli, was fascinated by his dreams. It's not a coincidence. Okay, so we are imaginative creatures. We've been fooled into thinking that our biggest strength was our ability to analyze. Computers are already better at that. Let's use computers as our analysis companions, so that we can start accessing and playing with, because the right hemisphere loves to play. Our dreams love to play. That's why they're tricky. And we're seeing this happen in the business world and the scientific world, that we can't make progress with rationality alone. That's been proven over and over. And so we need to access that part of our brain which is comfortable with uncertainty, ambiguity, and volatility, because that's the time we live in. And those qualities are only going to ramp up. So the more we can learn to tap into the heart center, the empathic, through our dreams, finding a poet that you really like, finding a website that discusses spiritual issues, forming groups that talk about these things in salon environments. We're seeing this happening around the world because people are realizing that we've reached the limit of growth, of material growth, and we better start growing spiritually and in a heart-centered way, or we're not going to be very happy campers going forward.
Yeah, it's not looking pretty that way. So what about daydreams and imagination? I mean, I know that our brain waves literally change when we go from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere. So when you're in the left brain, you're in beta, the day-to-day operation. But going into dreams, whether you're going to sleep or into a daydream or into an altered state or into a shamanic trance, your brain waves drop to beta and even theta. How can we interpret what we're getting at those realms? Because you start walking in the area of metaphor, don't you?
Yes, and the one thing that we know is that one of the most powerful ways for us to learn is through stories. And that's one thing that does separate us from the rest of the animal kingdom. We're very connected to the animal kingdom in more ways than we're separate. But one of the things that distinguishes us, the gift that nature's intelligence gave to us, because we came out of nature's intelligence, is the ability to play and the ability to tell stories. And why are stories such important and powerful teaching tools? Because they're metaphoric. And I would consider a reverie just as important as a dream. Play with it. Have a conversation with it. We're able to self-reflect. We're able to have conversations with those inner images and sensations that come to us through our dreams, our intuitions, our imaginative leaps, all of which we know neurologically enter the right hemisphere of the brain.
So if I just had this thought, it might be right, it might be wrong, but if we are engaging in a story, that leads us to jump into the right hemisphere of the brain to create the imagery of what we're hearing. Am I on the right track here?
Yes, and one of my favorite teachers of all time, he's not as well known as I would prefer, is Dr. Milton Erickson. Very few people know who he was. Dr. Erickson was a medical doctor who never practiced medicine. He became the world's foremost hypnotherapist. And he was known as a magician because he could talk directly with the client's unconscious. Okay? And so he taught that if you want to put yourself into a trance or someone else into a trance, the phrase that's most powerful is "once upon a time."
There you have it. Drops you right in there, doesn't it?
Drops you into story mode.
Yeah.
And what science is starting to reveal, the right hemisphere, more metaphor, the scientists who are more into the right hemisphere, like the quantum theorists, understand that at the quantum level of existence, as well as with the human unconscious and the right hemisphere of our brain, imagination is more important than knowledge. Not just because imagination is fun, but imagination can get us into a deeper understanding of who we are and how we connect to the world than any other faculty we have. Albert Einstein said it, if it's good enough for him, it should be good enough for us.
So I have a strong question for you. Douglas, are we looking at the eve of destruction or a new renaissance?
We're looking at a new renaissance. But as I mentioned before, Gwilda, and this is crucial, you don't get a renaissance or an evolutionary leap without a huge dislocation and falling apart. It's the way nature works. Before we ever showed up on the planet, nature created forest fires that were very destructive. Why? Because a forest fire gets rid of old growth so that new growth can get enough sunlight and water to survive and grow. And so I do believe we're already headed there. I've put down specifics as to reasons as to why we are headed there. You can look at a group called Unanimous AI that's actually engaging humans to do what's called hive intelligence, which is part of nature's intelligence. We're seeing this popping up underneath the 24/7 news cycle. But in order to get to a new renaissance, you have to get through a period of very dark dislocation. I mentioned the Italian Renaissance during the Black Plague. Anthropologists now say that the reason our ancestors evolved into us is because of a huge climate change that happened in Africa, which went from a tropical over a period of time to a grassland. And as a result, creatures had to learn to stand up on their 2 feet to see over the grass and learn
Well,
to...
Douglas, it's unfortunately we're out of time. So, but I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
It's so much fun talking with you and getting a chance to use our imagination and have a nice reverie conversation.
Thanks again. Our guest this hour has been Douglas Gunther, the author of The Quantum and the Dream, Visionary Consciousness, AI, and the New Renaissance. To find out more about Douglas, where you can find his book and all he has to offer, visit his website, douglasgrunther.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. Please be sure to join us right here next time. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to our rapidly evolving world.
From the stars.